She managed $500 million in budgets for Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins in Abu Dhabi. Then she walked away to go run pool trucks in Detroit. Since then, 5 franchise brands, 2 sold at their peak, and 3 she still owns today. And she says passive income is a myth. Here's what actually works. This is Nora. I am incredibly excited about today's guest. Nora, you have managed $500 million in budgets in Abu Dhabi for Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins, and then you walked away from it all to go run pool trucks in Detroit. Tell us how that happened, what pushed you to look into business ownership and got you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because even I think if I would have asked myself this years ago, I would have been like, there's no way I would have ever done this. The reality is that I started out like most people, corporate career. And it wasn't because I wasn't entrepreneurial or that I wanted my own business. I always did, but I used to always think you needed millions of dollars in the bank to open a business. And I didn't know any other way. So the reality is, I went to school, got the corporate job, started to bring the exact same skill sets that I bring today to my businesses to the corporate world. So worked my way up, got into different positions. I'm from Detroit, so if anybody knows anything, I definitely started in automotive, and then I ended up having an opportunity to move to the United Arab Emirates and work in Abu Dhabi, with the Cleveland Clinic and then Johns Hopkins. And it was from a corporate career perspective, it was all kind of clicking the right boxes. Internally, though, I think what I saw was I was operating at a high level, large teams, large budgets, implementing things, but not really getting the full benefit of what I was doing. And this desire of building something for myself never went away, even in the 15 years of corporate world. I think also wanting more flexibility with my time. When you're in those environments, your time is their time. And I didn't quite realize at that moment because entrepreneurship definitely takes up a lot of your time as well, that this idea that somehow time was taken away from me, and the only track I had was this corporate track, and only when somebody else decides that I was ready for a next promotion or the next level will I get there. And I think that just never sat right with me. So the reality was I was very successful on paper. I think I had built a strong resume. I had great connections, but there was definitely a side of me that was just unsatisfied. I hate to use the word bored a little bit, but I think I was. I don't know if I would have ever left the career to start a business, but I was also looking to kind of relocate back to the US. And I just thought it really is now or never. I don't know if I was gutsy enough to maybe quit a job that was, very well doing financially for me and my family. But I think I was relocating and I thought, if I don't do this now, I'll never do this. That was really the short answer. And I thought if it doesn't work, I trust myself enough get a new job. So the only theory was that we're going to go all in. And when it doesn't work, you go back and you get a new job. And that was kind of what initially really pushed me to make that decision.
I love this answer for so many reasons. There's a lot of good nuggets in it. Um, the main one for me is, knowing that you're a very capable person and you have been your whole life and you've had this successful career, but you still didn't have this, kind of sense of full fulfillment and something that was your own. And I think a lot of people feel this way, and a lot of people don't go do anything about it. But what you realize, I think, is an important unlock to have the confidence to go face that fear and to go jump off the deep end and see if it works, is that I'm still Nora who's done all these amazing, awesome, accomplished things, and me quitting and starting something, even if it fails, doesn't change that. I still have this, track record and career, and dozens and dozens of companies will hire me back. I'll find another job. I have a set of skills that's valuable and people would pay for. And a lot of people don't make that connection, as obvious as it might be, and they think, well, if I fail, now I have a tarnish on my resume, and know who's going to hire me. And it's like, well, you just leave one maybe small loss in some people's eyes, and others they'll look at that as Nora takes calculated risk. She has problem solving ability. All these things that you learned as an entrepreneur, even though the business might not have worked out, you still advanced and grew and developed as an individual. And many companies would take you, back or hire you, from scratch 10 times over. And when I was at Ernst and Young, so I was at Ernst and Young before I started my entrepreneurial career. And same thing, I remember having an exit interview with a partner at the Charlotte firm, and I was terrified. I thought he was gonna say, "Why would you leave a Big 4 consultancy to go start a" it was a laundry and dry cleaning, tech platform, essentially, and I thought they were gonna laugh at me out of the office, and I remember I'll never forget this. This guy was a partner, very successful, probably made multiple seven figures a year, and I tell him what I'm doing, and he starts tearing up a little bit. This guy that everyone was intimidated by and scared of, and he tells me, he's like, "Alex, my biggest regret in life is not going to do what you're about to go do now. I make all this money, but I'm not super fulfilled. I'm not super happy." And he's like, "If this doesn't work out, we'll take you back in a heartbeat." And I'm sure so like it gave me permission to like, not that I needed the permission, but it gave me that like, final push that made me feel really good about the decision that I was making. And I think you're exactly right. You go in all in on this, and worst case scenario, you're just going back to what you were doing, which wasn't all that bad. I mean, it was actually really good, right? You were very successful at a high paying job. You probably liked what you did, a lot of respects. Um, you can always go back. I just don't think people realize that.
I love that, Alex, and I love your story. And you're right. It wasn't that you needed the push, but definitely knowing that you had somebody who kind of validated what you were thinking is so powerful. And I think one of the reasons is I did trust myself. I knew what I brought to the table. And I think that's so important. I don't know if the 20-year-old version of me maybe was the same, but I knew that I could hustle. I knew what I knew, and I also did not put any weird pressure on myself to be the smartest person in the room. I have no weird qualms about being the best looking or the best, none of that. I am very comfortable with failure. It's probably the first thing I tell people. As much as you see my successes maybe on a resume, I have failed 20 times in between that. You just don't see it maybe. And I'm comfortable enough with myself to say it's part of the process. And I think people need to really just kind of repeat those words to themselves. I don't have any perfectionism type traits where it has to be perfect. I'm almost like pull it together and whatever I do is my best at that moment. And I'm comfortable with that. I really am. Not because I don't try, actually, it's because I try, because I know I'm pulling 100% when I do something. And that was the same trust I gave myself. I know if I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to go in 100%. I don't know any other way to do this.
Yeah, and I think something you said too about your failure and you haven't been scared of it, and it's a part of the journey and part of what shaped you. It's another thing that unfortunately I don't think a lot of people feel, and I don't know, maybe society's to blame, but we're so conditioned to get good grades in high school, college and high school, and we're rewarded and praised, and you get these awards, and then you graduate, you're like, "Well, now I have to go get a Fortune 500 job," and where there's more ratings and reviews and gold stars. They're just the adult version, and so we're never taught that failing is probably one of the most powerful tools in our tool belt is to go find ways to do things differently, go take bigger risks than you might have otherwise, because it'll sharpen you and stretch you in a way that makes you more prepared and more skilled and more valuable in the long run overall. Um, but we're not conditioned again to think that way. And so a lot of people get comfortable, they get complacent, and they don't go do something like you did. And so I want to go back to that story, but I get what drove you to this point. I get you felt you had the confidence, you're fine with failure, you had the skill set. What about franchising versus, buying your own business or starting your own independent business? How did you think about what it was that you were going to go do?
Yeah, it's funny. I wish I had some big creative idea and I told everybody, I'm gonna leave and go start my own blank. I had nothing. I knew a business owner. I knew I had operations was my strength. I knew, I always say there's creatives and then there is operators. I'm definitely an operator. I recognized where I was really strong in. And I also recognized I didn't have an original idea that I was trying to execute. What I had was really good business skills that I thought that if I could take an idea, anybody else's idea, because I did not have one, and I can execute it at a high level. What I loved about franchising, and this is where I'm kind of proud of myself, I didn't know what I didn't know. I wasn't gonna go out and say, "I can do it better, so I'm gonna start something from scratch," and I didn't know that, and maybe it was also my protection of still being a little safe. I said, "If the model is proven and there is a team kind of behind you," is the way I saw franchising. It's not just the business in a box, but there's also a group of people that you can ask and you can bounce ideas, but then I'm able to kind of run with it myself. I thought that seemed like a win-win for me. And like I said, I was an operator. So at that time, it was more just kind of figuring out the shuffle of the franchises, understanding what it was, and kind of picking something that I thought aligned with one, what I thought the community was missing, which I think is so important. It wasn't just duplicating something, it was the community's missing this. And then I think number 2, it was this is within my budget and I feel like it's something I could really kind of just execute. At that time when I started, it was a swim franchise, and the answer was simple. My kids needed swim lessons, and there was no private swim, places in my area, and I thought, "Oh, that makes sense," and I just had kids young enough that needed lessons, and it was focused on water survival, which to me was a life skill, and no other logic except for that, and I could financially afford the franchise and whatever fees you need to execute it.
I think franchising is one of the most overlooked paths to wealth creation in America, and it gets this bad rep at times because, it's McDonald's or it's Subway's what people think, and they're like, "Oh, it's fast food," and one which has negative connotations, or it's gonna cost me millions of dollars to open. So you have that bucket. And then on the other end, you have, oh, franchising, there's snake oil salesmen and brands that don't work. And I think that's true for any business. You might buy the wrong business that has bad financials and an owner that's hiding things from you. And so I think this is true regardless of any business. But for whatever reason, franchising gets this bad rep. And the reality is there is risk and there are bad brands and there are, riskier systems and there are, things you should do differently. But if done with the right level of diligence, with the right level of research and finding a problem that resonates with you, like it did for you clearly, and that that you operationally have a background that could translate to, why not? And it sounds like you found that. So I get, why franchising versus starting from scratch. The other question I have, and I think I know the answer just in a short period of talking to you, is was the goal from day one to always own multiple locations?
The goal was always to do my best, and I say that in a very clear way. I don't think small. So I wasn't like definitely I wasn't starting this because I thought actually I was worried that, they were going to sell the other territories around me and, I yeah, I believe in my own ability to grow something. So the vision was always to grow it. I think where I started to expand into looking into either it was additional territories with franchising, it's buying more territories, or kind of not putting all your eggs in the same basket is kind of when I
Mhm.
became a multi, different types of franchises that I started to get into. It was really just linked with I can grow this more, and I'm going to grow it to the highest ability that I have. There is a point in time where I don't know if I could make a swim school a $50 million operation. But if I knew I had more in me, I'm like, well, I can make this a $2 million operation, but then I can also open this here and they can kind of feed each other, right? They were both like in my first two franchises, just so happened to be in the kids space and education space. So I started to think about where else can I utilize the same systems that I had already built to make something else successful and allow me to kind of not put all my eggs in the same basket, because at some point that becomes your income. It becomes where it's kind of like having a single family income home. You don't want that, right? So you want to be able to diversify that.
Yeah, like any investment, whether it's real estate or equities, diversification helps, especially if you have, a similar customer base too. Child-focused brands, you can probably leverage the same customer base, but you have different services that might be seasonal, et cetera. I completely agree with that. And I think, you were sharing that you've at this point bought into 5 different franchise brands. You've sold 2 of them, you've kept 3.
Yeah.
So you clearly have a filter or point of view on, what you like, what you want in a business. So what is one thing that makes you say absolutely yes on a franchise? And then what's one thing that makes you pass or, decide to move on or say no?
When I first started a franchise, I remember going to them saying, "Okay, so where's your operations guide, or where's this?" And then they're like, "Well, we don't have that, or we don't." I just buy like I was kind of almost expecting them to come in and not run my business, but I think there was an expectation that if I had a problem, they had a problem. And then I realized very quickly, oh no, I have a problem and it's my business. So I think one I want to just clearly clarify to people, a franchise does not mean an endless supply of support and that they're going to jump on the same boat with you. No, they gave you the box and now you got to kind of figure out what to do with it. So I think it was I first had to kind of learn that and one good kind of smack across like, "Oh wait, it's my company." And though my success is their success, I don't know if they care about my failure as much as I care about my failure. So I think one is kind of really taking on the business. It's your business, whether it's a franchise or not. This is 100% yours. You're operating it. You have to execute it. The bad side of franchising is I tend to stay away from what I call things that haven't been proven, right? Like when I see somebody who starts a franchise after they have one good location, I just think, man, you should not be selling a franchise. You should be duplicating and telling me it could be successful. So for me, I have my own little red flags, not only in franchising, but even buying a business and things like that. I tend to stay away from concepts that have not been proven. I think that what you're buying in a franchise is a proven model that you can execute. I once heard a statistic, like some of the haircutting franchises, and they said the worst performing were the ones that were owned by the hairdressers. And that was because they think they know better. And I just thought, man, that is so interesting. So I always tend to say, you pay for what you get. So if I bought because I thought that was the best swim program, I'm going to execute their swim program. If
Mhm.
if I bought it because they make the best ice cream, then that's what I'm buying, and I'm going to continue to make it exactly the way they make it. I play with the operations. I don't play with the product. So I
Yep.
kind if I love the product, I think that's kind of the biggest driving force for me. Do I love the product enough where I can fully execute it to their vision because their vision is supposed to be proven. So I think
Mhm.
that's an important component with franchising. But not everything I think should be a franchise.
No, I think I talk about, the value, and especially in franchising, the value that the franchisor provides upfront is probably the most it'll ever be. Training, site selection, if there's a retail location, technology, initial customers, all this stuff. And honestly, over time, as you get more comfortable, you get more skills, you get more revenue, etc., the value almost diminishes, but your royalties go up. You're paying the least amount of royalties at the beginning, but you're getting the most value. And so at first, franchising feels like the best thing in the world to the franchisee, and the franchisor is like, "Oh my gosh, I hope they're a good operator, and I hope this works out because we're making a huge investment." And naturally, those two things kind of cross, and you have a gap on the other side now where you, as the franchisee, feel like I'm giving up all this cost, but I'm not getting value anymore. And so you have to think about that relationship and how it changes because the franchisor is investing a lot up front, and then you're eventually later on kind of paying that debt back essentially, but it might not, in year 6, it might not feel like it. Like, "Oh, what am I, doing this for?" So to your point, you need a brand with good systems and legs and, proven maturity and, constant ability to innovate and, try to continue to add more value over time, but they gotta be a good partner, and you gotta look for those red flags like you mentioned.
Absolutely, 100%. And I love what you just said. You're right. That beginning is when you're getting the most support. And then later you're kind of like, I'm spending so much in franchising. But the reality is that was the benefit of what you got initially.
It's like I tell people it's like starting the game of business on square 3 instead of square 1. If your goal, say your goal is to get to square 10, like you're just there faster than you would have on your own. You
Mhm.
probably could have done it on your own. It's not a question of like, can I do this on my own or not? It's how fast do I want to go? How many mistakes do I want? You're paying for tuition. It's like paying an attorney or a real estate agent or whoever it may be for their expertise. It's like you might be able to figure some of these things out on your own, but you're gonna make mistakes that might cost you even more and more time, and we've got one life to live, and you might have a goal of, hey, I want to spend time with my 3 kids
Yeah,
faster, and this will get me there faster versus the headache of doing it all from scratch and on my own.
absolutely.
That that doesn't mean it's a guarantee and it's all a given, but it definitely de-risks it and speeds you up. um, I want to ask you more questions because a lot of people, on research and diligence, because I think a lot of people listening, they might be coming to franchising for the first time. They might be looking for their second brand, and maybe they got lucky on the first one, and they're like, I don't really know how I, diligence brands. Do you have any research or kind of due diligence tips that you've learned that you do now versus the first time you were looking for the first brand you invested in?
I think that my first thing is to always, and I always tell people anytime they say, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to, I always say to them, what does the market need? Either I can truly bring something that the market is missing, and it doesn't mean it's available in every community, right? Number one, is it missing in your market? But I feel like number two is, or you can do it better. But if you can't answer those two questions, if it's like there's 10 pizza shops and I'm going to be number 11, but just pure, I'm not gonna say arrogance, but just pure because I can do it better, because I like pizza, I'm gonna sell it better. I don't like that kind of business. In my mind, it really comes down to, does that make sense here? So the unit of economics is really important to me. Is this something that I see that it could be very successful here? Am I, if I'm sitting in a premium service, am I sitting in a premium neighborhood that can actually afford those services? I can offer the best home cleaning service ever, and it doesn't mean I'm sitting in the right neighborhood to get hired for it. So I kind of
Mhm.
always tell people, you got to look at the economics, you have to look at what's available around you. And when I'm looking in, and I kind of compare that with the franchises. Has this franchise been able to prove that they can operate, let's say, in a winter market the same way that they can in a summer market? Have they
Mhm.
proven that their things are interchangeable, right? To some extent, because I'm now gonna bring it here to Detroit or wherever it is that I'm bringing it to, and if it works in Florida, it doesn't mean it works necessarily here. So I feel like it's more just asking myself, people tend to be more successful in their own neighborhood, and I didn't know that. But once I understood that, it's because the most we know about is our neighborhood.
Mhm.
I know what community I'm sitting in. I know what might sell. I know something that, maybe somebody else doesn't. I might know that, oh, parents will invest in this, but not this because I speak to them all day. So I do think sometimes just kind of ask yourself, what is missing for me? What do I want to see? And I think the answer is almost sitting in front of you a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta know your market. I like that a lot. It's there's so many factors to consider when you look at a brand. I tell people you have to understand, your individual risk tolerance, what you're good at operationally. If you're really good at sales and then you're running a business with 30, frontline employees, but you don't like operations, like you need an operating partner or some sort of solve there. You need to figure out your goals, and then you need to figure out uh, again, the market that you're in, is this the right timing and the right fit for the customer base that you're gonna go serve? And so I think you hit the nail on the head. Is there a franchise brand that you've got really serious about, you're deep in diligence on, and then you decided to walk away?
Yes, there is. I Not because maybe it's a bad franchise. I think I trust my gut, and it's not, and I don't even mean it in a superficial kind of like, oh, just trust your gut. I don't talk like that in general, but I don't like to be oversold. I think I can probably, for the most part, I think I'm good enough to tell when I'm being BS'd a little bit. So if it doesn't make sense to me, it just doesn't make sense. And even if somebody tries to over explain something to me, I'm comfortable enough saying, listen, you might have a great product, but if I'm not getting it and I don't see the vision for it, it's just not for me. I'm not saying it's bad overall, and maybe it's not bad for everybody. I'm very comfortable and knowing what I know and don't know. And I kind of appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty check that I have, if it's something to do more like in more marketing related. Like I know I'm not even interested in that, like so that might not be the right area for me. Or if I find it too complex or, where I would have to hire everybody else and I would not be able to do that service myself. If I can't go out and do the service myself or learn every aspect of the business, it's not a good business for me. That's just how I operate. I learn every aspect of all of my businesses. I have a pool cleaning company. Guess what? I can clean
Mhm.
that pool like anybody else. I can answer the calls. I don't want to be the person that has to go out on the field and clean the pool, but I know how to do those things. So when a question
Mhm.
comes up, when something needs to be changed, I could just as easily jump in and do it. So for me, I think it's more about know yourself and know what you need to be successful. And I think that kind of creates the red flags. And like I said, maybe for me, the overselling, I'm comfortable enough to say, yeah, doesn't make sense to me. And that's okay. Maybe, it was the next Uber and I passed it up. I don't know. But then it wasn't meant for me either. And I trust in that process. I think I do say, if it's meant for me, I'll go for it. If it's not, then it was never mine. And I think I'm comfortable with that.
Yep. You gotta learn how to say no. We were talking about that at the beginning, and being comfortable whether it was wrong in hindsight or not. At least you learned something, and you got to stick with your gut and your confidence because that intuition has been shaped and formed over years and years of experience and decisioning, and it's a powerful muscle. I
Absolutely, and I'm
want to.
not talking about, like,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I don't know if we can swear on this, but I'm not talking about, like, the "oh, shit" moment, right? Because I think we both signed a franchise deal and gone, "Oh, whoops," like, how work starts, but I'm not talking about that because I think we can tell the difference between just your own fear moment where you're like, "Oh, okay, now time to execute," or which is okay. I'm talking about real, like, "That doesn't make sense," or "That business, I'm not getting it, there's so much competition." Like, if it doesn't make sense to you, move on.
Yep, completely agree. And are you someone that's always on the hunt for new brands, new expansion, or is it something that just kind of like comes to you and it's infrequent and it's more opportunistic, or are you like, I'm looking. At first, you said I'm wanting to do the best that I can. Is that a number, experience? Is it again opportunistically brands are popping up and you're taking them as they come?
I think I see it more like opportunities. So I think if an opportunity comes, I don't go I'm not searching them. I'm not sitting back going, "Oh, I really need another business," or "I'd love to add something else to my portfolio." I think it's more if it's the right fit, I'm going to see it or find it, I think, in my path. And there's a lot of times, I kinda joke, we don't pl I don't play tennis, my husband doesn't play tennis, we do business. That's what we do. So this is a hobby for me. This is something that I truly enjoy doing. So for me, looking at other businesses or seeing an opportunity when it presents itself, I think I'm always looking. It would be but do I jump on every opportunity? No. But listen, I could be sitting judging a pitch competition and secretly I'm like, I really want to invest in that. Like there's I think I'm always listening and I'm always aware of what's going on around me. I think that's just true to my nature.
You've got an eye. I like that. And it sounds like, I mean, again, you sold 2 brands already, and correct me if this was wrong, you sold them essentially kind of at their peak,
Yeah.
and you kept the 3 others. So most owners that I know, they either hold everything forever, they have like I forget what it's called, there's a fallacy, but it's like you keep holding on to things, or they sell because they've burnt out. You seem to know exactly when to do which, and I wanna know, how do you decide that? Do you look at each brand and say, "Hey, this is what I'm building to sell," or "This is what I'm building to keep, and it's a legacy thing, and it's fun to me, and it's a hobby," or do you have some sort of kinda like internal decision, making framework?
When I opened my first business, there was never a vision of selling. Like that wasn't in the books. I was just trying to operate and trying to make it the most successful. And why would you sell a successful business? Like you couldn't, I didn't even understand that concept. I think it was as we were operating, as we grew, as we got it bigger, I held on to my first business for the first 5 years before I even invested in a second business, just so you know. And then after that, I was able to grow faster. The reality was, I kind of believe, number one, I'm not the baker that owns a bakery. That I can see where there's maybe more emotional attachment. I am truly a business operator who loves operating businesses. So I'm not attached from an emotional, I'm attached to my business because I think business is personal, but I'm not attached to the concept where I can't see where that business can grow more or it can continue to do well, whether it's me on the helm or somebody else. I'm not egotistical enough to believe I'm the success of the business. I believe I can build it, but once you get a business to a certain level, I really believe that if you're not looking to continue to grow it, because not growing in the world of business does start to set you back a little bit, because then that means somebody else can kind of come up behind you. So for me, it's more like once you get it to a level where you're loving it and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to, and it is in the green. People underestimate you need to be in the green to sell a business at a profit. Once you get it there, man, you've gotten it. That's a success. And for me, that is a success within itself. So when I go in the market to sell a business, I'm not going because if it doesn't sell, it's shutting down. I'm selling it because I'm like, "Man, we just got it to this point. I think we can convert our money. We can focus on something else." Like, it's more of its own peak of success. It's successful when it got there. It's successful if it sells. It's successful if you invest in something else. So for me, it's more get the business to where you want it to be or as far as you want to take it. And then that is an excellent time to kind of exit it. And I do want to repeat to people because people misunderstand 90% of businesses are not built to sell. And that's a horrible statistic. I'm not looking
Mhm.
pass on the business to my kids, and if they don't take it, we're shutting it down. I would never burden my kids with these businesses and say, "Be careful, good luck," that wasn't the goal. The goal was always let me make them successful where I can make them. But I definitely think it's more to do with when I get it to my peak, I sell. But I also make sure that I'm looking at that business for a few years saying, "Okay, we gotta be in the green. We gotta make sure our books are clean. We gotta make sure that our numbers are making sense," because that's how you sell a business. If your
Yep.
book is clean and your taxes are a little gray and, you make money, but you don't put it down on paper, and I mean, like, you pay yourself, but it's not clearly identified. Like, those are the things that will always make that business unsellable because it can't be duplicated. It was all based on you as an individual.
I love that you're saying this. I was just at a workshop in Vegas. Alex Hormozy is one of our investors. He's invested in Franzi, and I was at one of their sessions, and the whole thing they're talking about is to sell a business. and he talked to all these investment bankers and, folks that do this professionally and for a job, and he's like, "Starts with the revenue, that's what gets people interested. Do you have a, high revenue generating business?" And then it's margin, it's the EBITDA margin on the business, okay, it's profitable, so in the green. And then there's all these value adders and value, subtractors or detractors, and, the value adders were things like pretty consistent growth, 20% or so year over year is like exciting. If it's 10%, that's fine. If it's 5%, that's fine, but it's growing, a growing business. Then there's, is there recurring revenue or retention? Is there other markets that you haven't tapped into yet? So there's untapped value. There's all these things, and there's subtractors. There's key man risk. Is it all dependent on Nora? If that's the case, it, lowers the value of the business. And it sounds like you've been very thoughtful about this kind of rubric. Similarly, it's like, hey, revenue's got to be in a spot. It's got to be profitable. All right, what are the value adders? What are the value detractors? And when I was sitting there listening to it, I thought, I know a lot about business. I've run a ton. I've built a bunch of my own. I went to college for this. And this was the most simple way I've ever seen it breaking down, where I even forgot about the basics and the foundation and looked at that and thought, everyone needs to hear this. And I get why Hormozy is so popular and well known. It's because he's delivering so much just like duh, like value, and you kind of hits you over the head with it. And you were reminding me of that, talking about, hey, it really is as simple as this. It's a lot of hard work, but it's grow the revenue, make it profitable, and then sell it when it's at its, my version of my peak forward, and let someone else see if they can take it to the other, thing. And I'll be happy knowing that I took it to a great place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think and I always try to distinguish between am I just tired? Anytime I get a little bit burnout, which I think is so normal in this space. I remember I used to like I just want to go back to waitressing. Like that was that's my you go to work, you finish the job and you get to go home and you don't have to think about it again, right? Versus business ownership is with you 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So anytime I start talking about going back to waitressing, it's my joke of I'm burnt out. And different than my business needs to be sold. So I always tell people, are you burnt out or is it that you want to sell your business? Because burnout is something different. That's something that needs to be resolved with team structure and putting the right systems in place to make
Mhm.
it the type of business that you want to sell. But to sell out of desperation or you're done, that's unfortunate. And that would be the worst place to be. That would be more to me a failure in the business was that I couldn't put the systems in place or
Mhm.
I kind of gave up on it a little bit.
I heard this analogy recently where it was like, if you want to sell your house, to get the best price, you might have to do this work to it and improve it and make it nicer. And, by the time you do all this work, let's say it's a year,
Mhm.
you're like, I kind of like this place now. Like I could stay here and I could live here, or I can go sell it now because it's got all this additional, street appeal or curb appeal, and it's in a better position to sell. And a business isn't that much different. Either way, you have to do the work. Either you do the work and you decide to stay and live in the house or live in the business and keep it, but you still did the work to get it to a point where it's cash flowing and it's awesome and it's amazing to the point you would want to keep it, or you did the work to sell it, like the house, and you now have that option, but either way, you're doing the work. And I think you said that, something similar, really well. And either way, you've got to figure out, is this burnout? Is this something I'm missing systems? I got to put teams in place, et cetera. Or do I need to sell? And you probably still need to put the work in to put the systems in place in the team to make it more valuable when you go to, when you go to sell it. Um, so I want to talk about some of the like numbers of the business, or how do you measure when you know you're there? So you're operating Pool Scouts, Wonderly Lights, and Real Property Management, and
Yeah.
you're in Detroit and Columbus.
Yep.
And so you're not in every market every day. How do you actually know what's happening when you're not there, and if things are going well or not well?
I'm highly my traits that when I was little, you would take those tests to tell you what kind of jobs you should have, and it said I should be a secretary. And at first, really offended. I was like, secretary, like I thought I had more potential. But the reality is the exact same traits that probably made me look really good as a secretary on paper have been kind of my strengths in life. I am a great communicator. I'm highly organized. I do look at the details. I like the reports. And I think that's kind of my secret sauce, I guess, for managing across a lot of different things. I am very data reporting driven. I also believe in really, really strong communication. I don't speak in the gray. I'm very black and white. People that know me, I'm like, nope, just go direct. I don't need the sugarcoating. Uh, and honestly, ultimately, I hold myself accountable for our success and failure. If I don't have the right team out in Columbus, that's on me. That's a problem that I actually have to fix. But with trusting or putting in the right people and then putting in the right oversight, because you don't just hand your business over to people and just hope for the best. Like that doesn't work either. I think it's a mixture of put the systems in place and then have the system to check it. It's the checks and balance of it, making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. I do also look at reporting and I look at numbers. And specifically when you're high in the service industry, cash flow plays such an important part of the business operations that you got to make sure your cash flow is running correctly. So, I'm looking at the numbers every single day. I'm looking at our data. I'm looking at how many customers we've serviced. I know pretty much when we've one person, whether it's on the property management side or on the pool side or even on the lighting side, had a bad experience with us. I know that information. I'm reliant on my team, but I'm also aware of where to find that information if I need it. Because I think you have to, as hands off as I like to be, because I believe that the business has to run with or without you sitting there over it. I also think that you have to be engaged and involved enough to know when you have to step in. And I think that's the trick. I always tell people I hire every position. I'm not an employee of this company, but my oversight is everywhere. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of been a big what allows us to operate at the level that we operate. The reason we can run across multiple markets is because I think we have the systems in place that allow us to do so.
Are there things that you look at every day or every week that
Yeah.
indicate to you, "Hey, what are some examples of, I guess, those things?"
Yeah, I'm looking at everything between our revenue and our target revenue for the different times of the year. I'm looking at number of jobs complete and operational efficiencies. I look at labor costs. I'm mainly in the service industry. Labor cost is a big driving factor for us. I'm looking at those prices that, like the variables, not necessarily like the fixed cost. I'm not worried about the van price. That's not changing. But I am worried about how many people do I have on that van and were we more efficient because we were running two versus one. Did that actually make a little bit more sense or a little bit less sense? I'm looking at our customer retention. I am a big believer it is better to keep either a good customer or a good employee than it is to replace them. So for me, retention is really, really important. I'm looking at repeat business. And like I said, I'm also looking at cash flow. I tend to take on where we also bid on big projects. Those type of
Mhm.
projects are more city projects or government projects, right? Those are usually like 150-page documents that you're kind of going through and you have to put together a bid proposal to try to win that business. I think my corporate background allows me to be very comfortable with bidding on things like that. But the reality is, if you can't cash flow your business, you can't bid on big business because their payment terms are not credit card on file, bill them. They're paying us, 30 to
S
45 days after the job was done. Um, so as fun as it is to bid on those things, there's a part of me that's like, okay, can we afford to win this business? Because it might look really good on paper, or we're in the pool service
Gotta
business.
front
Well,
load the cash.
yeah, you got to just be very strategic. And I always say, I'm also comfortable with small growth. The very first year that we ran the pool service company, it was one van, one territory. We weren't looking to be the number one player in the market, not on year one. Year one, my entire goal was to learn the operations, to learn every aspect of that company, and then to make sure we're operating efficiently. That way, by the time I add van number two, van three, now we're at van 7 and van 8, right? By the time we do that, I knew that we had the infrastructure in place. I'm comfortable with slow and steady wins the race. I think we have this idea of business that you have to run. I'm kind of like it's one customer at a time, and every experience matters and every phone call. Like it really is a lot of baby steps. I don't believe in the one big contract that will change things. It really is just
Mhm.
little step at a time.
Every day. I agree. And it compounds. It's like money. Compound interest is the most powerful force of mankind, I think Warren Buffett said. And I think that applies to our time too. It's not just, leaving your money invested in markets and it compounding. It's also everyday intentional action, trying to constantly improve and be better. All these little, micro optimizations that you have to do. Um, I'm really interested in, again, you've got multiple brands across multiple cities. Do you treat each brand differently? Is there a different management style, or is there, like, kinda one, Nora's operating system that, like, all of your GMs or, the managers that you have, you operate under, or do you treat them a little bit differently? Is it almost like raising kids where, like, they have different personalities and you've gotta, kinda meet them where they are? How do you approach that?
I love that. I think the answer is both. I think it's twofold. One, everybody has their own personality and you navigate it. You're not, but the reality is the structure is the same. When you have when you have people in place, you gotta make sure that they have the right training tools. The basics are the same, right? Like making sure that they have the right training, making sure that you're getting the right people, that you're giving them enough accountability, that they have what they need to be successful, making sure that the system works. I kind of mentioned earlier, I came from automotive where Lean Six Sigma is a big deal, right? Being able to, and I do these little exercises. Where I write down every step. Okay, what did it take us to book that job? Okay, first I had to do here, here. Like, how many steps did that take? Could we make that more efficient? I think we're constantly challenging ourselves to be more efficient. And I think that type of system translates regardless to what industry. But the reality is, I do also believe in every business has its own like little nuances. And some in one area where you only have maybe a few employees, you run things a little bit differently versus when you have, 20, 30 people on the road, right? Like those are the things that will be a little bit differently. But the reality is these systems have to be in place. Your communication better be an all-star, and you better make sure you are training and hiring and you know, having the right people out there doing what they're supposed to do, or it doesn't work.
And does that apply the same to Columbus versus Detroit? Because I mean, one's right in your backyard and one's 3 hours away. I mean, are you having to do different things because it's virtual versus in person? Or how for those listening that might be thinking about, "Oh, I'm in Charlotte, right now, and I might open a location in Raleigh. It's a little over 2 hours away." How do you do that? Are there any, kinda tips or tricks or things that you've had to learn to make that possible?
I would say you have to be flexible enough that you can jump to one location just as easily as you jump to the other one, right? Obviously, Detroit is right in my backyard. That's going to always be easier. But the reality is, if I got a call today, I'm heading straight to Columbus. I can be there within 3 hours or 3.5 hours, whatever the
Yep.
drive time is, right? I have to have enough flexibility to be able to do that. But also being truthful to what I said, I think your most success will always be closer to home. So sometimes
Mhm.
you don't even have to look that far to know where you want to start. I think if we did not have a strong Detroit operations, I would not have been able to do Columbus. I don't
Yep.
know if I'm sitting in Detroit. We're not an online business. We are in the service business. We have vans, we have a warehouse location, we have storage, we have items that get purchased. It's not just, oh, I'm selling products and I can sell across the US and I can just ship it from Detroit to someone's home in North Carolina. That's not the type of business that we're in. At one point, we were looking at expansion into Chicago. Well, the reality was I was running the numbers. I'm like, okay, we're going to need a place to stay in Chicago. We're going to need to get a few vans on the road. Now I need a warehouse space. And then I thought, no, you know what? Let's expand the Detroit market because that would cost me much less. And there's still areas I haven't quite maximized in Detroit. So I think it's always kind of where you're also assessing cost versus value of what makes sense, even though in my mind, Chicago's a great market. I'm not there yet. Maybe I need to just kind of reinvest and keep growing Detroit. So I think there almost has to also be a real conversation. It's not what do I want, it's what makes sense for the business. You know,
Mhm.
so I think that it's just kind of telling the difference. But also, I have strong leadership in Columbus. I have somebody that
Mhm.
I trust. I have somebody kind of running the day to day operations where I could stick to more of the strategic things. And I can do that from Detroit. I can also do that if I was sitting in Florida and working.
Yeah, you have to, yeah, it goes back to systems and having the right team, the right culture, and then when when you need to, being able to be there on a dime. And to your point, even though Detroit's easier, it's in your backyard, it's close to home. If you have to be in Columbus, you'll do it. And whether it's a 3-hour drive or a 3-hour flight, I mean, if drive is easier, right? You can make it last minute. But if you had to get on a plane, I know people who do that. It's just they don't do it until after they've nailed something locally and they have the systems and they have that muscle and that kind of repetition in of how to build teams, how to build systems. Then they start expanding beyond their home territory and, which cities, whether it's a drive or a flight, to get there.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
how we did it, right? Like, we were already successful locally. We're when and by the way, it was having the right opportunity. We didn't just decide, "Oh, let's just expand into Columbus." An opportunity became available in Columbus, and we thought, "That is perfect. Let's join that," right?
yep, yep. I love that. Well, before we wrap up, I want to ask you a few like quick hitter questions. It's not like they're one word answers by any means, but they're kind of shorter,
Ready.
punchier.
So
Uh, you're ready to go.
yes, let's do it.
Awesome. The first one is passive income. Do you think it's real or a myth?
It is 100% a myth. I don't like passive income, and I don't like what is it called, mailbox money,
Yeah.
or side hustles. I also hate that term as well. The reality is that once you build something and you have the team in place, it can become passive, but it's never passive income. It's something that one way or the other, whether in the beginning it might be all hands on deck or at some point, you always have to be involved enough. I know people that were highly successful and then they finally hired all the managers and then they started to vacation all the time. And guess what came next? Their business started to kind of go down, right? Like, so I don't believe in passive management or passive income.
Yep. I agree. There's a few large multi-unit operators I've met who they've described it to me like this. They first said, I did it at first. Like I'm in the business, I'm managing the location, I'm talking to the customers, and then it was we did it. So I started hiring assistant GMs or general managers. And so that was a period of time. He's like, I'm finally like a decade later into the phase of they did it or they do it, where I've hired a CEO now to run my 40 locations, and like he is truly out of the business now. And he has a CEO that he compensates very well, that's incentivized greatly to run it and care about it like an owner. But that took him decades plus to get to the point where now it's truly passive after, you know, I did it, we did it stages to get there.
Have to go through that whole train.
Exactly. The next one I have is there one hire that changed everything for you?
You know, I've had multiple businesses. I think it depends. It's ages and stages. So I think the one time I noticed where the best hire happened for me was when I had 75 employees and I was still HR. And it felt like I was getting poked all day. Like somebody was like, and this, and I need to come a little later. And every complex, and anybody who's a business owner knows what I'm talking about with staffing. When I hired an HR manager, it was as if like this like pressure was pulled off me, and it also then allowed me to clear my mind enough to be able to actually implement real good systems for HR. But when you're drowning in it and you're stuck in it, it's time to hire someone. And as much as we go, and not every business is ready for that right away, but I think it's more about if you became the employee, if I became where I had to pick up every phone call, I'm no longer being able to handle the business strategically. If I am HR, I can't even come up with the proper systems because I'm so busy being HR today, and I have to handle this person's schedule and this person wants tomorrow off. And like, so I always kind of say the best position becomes whatever you think you're drowning in where that support is needed. That allows you to focus more strategic versus the day-to-day stuff. You don't want to be the employee. Now in the beginning you might be, and I was many times, but you don't want to stay there.
Yep, you gotta figure out where you can get the most leverage and then you hire for that and backfill and move on to the next bottleneck.
Absolutely.
The next one I have I really like is you have 3 daughters. What do you tell your daughters success actually looks like?
I'm a big believer of leading by example. I don't have, and I know you have a child, and I know I don't carry parent guilt. And I mean that in the most positive, confident way. I believe that when I have to leave something early because I have a work meeting or if I have to be somewhere, I think that I'm showing an example of what hustle, hard work, and success looks like for my daughters. So, number one, I don't apologize for it. I'm very clear. Hey, it takes a lot of hard work to be successful, especially in the entrepreneurial space or even in careers, right? It takes a lot of hard work. So I want to reflect that to them. So I don't apologize for it, first and foremost, which I think is really important. And I also try to tell them it's not one big moment. Really, it's more about showing up every single day, consistency, discipline, doing small things, and just keep repeating. Because ultimately,
Mhm.
success, it's not even a number, it's just about repeating. Having a successful day and then repeat that creates the bigger level success.
Yep. That was really well said. I agree. I think, there's the argument of, "Oh, spend the time, but lead by example," and I agree with you. I think you can do both and spend quality time, but also set an example that if you really care, I think, about your children and wanna see them set up for a happy, fulfilled, successful life, the best thing to do is lead by example and show them how to do it. Just like you'd show someone how to do dishes or cut the grass or do this math problem, show them, how to be successful and independent and confident and committed and disciplined by doing it in front of their eyes.
Absolutely. And obviously, I want also like social responsibility. There is even being an entrepreneur, you're offering, you're bringing business and you're hiring people. And there's something really powerful about that. And I think that obviously empathy and social responsibility are so important. So I also like to be clear, what am I defining success as? Success isn't, I think money is a great thing, but I don't think it's the only thing. So I think there's
Right.
also kind of being able to show them, like, I want them to do great in school, but then there's a part of me that's like, "But they don't," it's not I was a
Right.
good student and I was okay sometimes, So there's also, where you're kind of maybe, trying to get them to see success in a way that allows them to fail and get back up, I think,
Yeah.
ultimately.
And I think everyone's definition is a little bit different. For some, like you said, oh, it's money's a big driver. For other, for me, it's impact. And I know if I have a great impact, all the other things come: jobs created, money, tax dollars back to the government, and hopefully they spend it the right way. People, yeah, fingers crossed. But people learning and developing by creating that impact. And so for me, it's that. But that's not the right end all be all answer. It's just my answer, and that's okay.
No, I love it.
Um, the last question I have for you is, you're a multi-brand, multi-unit operator. What's one thing nobody tells you about owning multiple businesses?
I think that you manage people and you manage systems, and I think you don't have to have the big picture. I think there was a lot of times where the only thing that got me to the next day, it wasn't because I had the vision. And this is all, I think the reason a lot of people get scared to go into business is because they can't see all of the steps. It's okay. Nobody can see all the steps. Even once you've done it, you're like, I can't even believe we just did all that. The reality, you have to truly, truly look at it in such a small scale and just knock 3 things off that list every single day. Like, it doesn't have to be
Mhm.
full. I think that we have such extreme type, especially with a lot of the motivation stuff, right? Like, wake up at 5 AM or you failed the day.
Yeah.
Go to 5 when you can, and when you can't, okay, keep moving, right? You just have to knock a few things out. So I'm kind of big on, I think you just have to hustle it. I think that there is grit. I think that I didn't have the words for that, what that meant, but that's really important. And if you think somebody's going to come in and do it for you, you're wrong. I think if you think it's easy, that's a joke. I kind of said in the beginning I wanted my own flexibility and time. Guess what? All I did was buy myself something that was 150 hours a week versus 40. Ain't that and I wasn't making any money doing it for a few years, right? So there was those struggles, but the reality is years later, I was like, we got the income back. I got the flexibility I wanted. I can grow. I don't miss anything for my kids now. I am at pickup. I am at drop off. I am able to go sit at the gym and do my 5 a.m. workout, right? Because I bought myself that through years of not being able to do that. And I think that's the
Mhm.
bit that sometimes people miss.
It's a trade-off. It's do you wanna do it now or later or slowly till you die?
Keep your job, you don't need to, I I think though there's so much value and beauty in being able to kind of control those things for yourself, which I think I've always appreciated with being a business owner.
Yeah, I'm gonna butcher this, but there's this like cartoon or this meme that I've seen where it was like entrepreneurs, This is why they're crazy, or it's like the entrepreneurial, fallacy. It's they leave their corporate job that pays well so that they can work less and make more money, but only to find out they have to work harder and make less money. It's like this like backwards thing, but eventually you break through and you do get there. But it's just like the cartoon's like this person like working and frustrated clearly because they're like, I left this high paying thing where I didn't work that much to now working, you know, twice as hard and making half the money.
Oh my gosh, absolutely, and we both and like I kinda used my example of, I'll just go back and waitress, like, I just don't can't handle the complexity of this, but that's just burnout, and that's just part of the process, so
Yep, there's gonna be many, many hard days, but a lot more good ones at the other end. So,
absolutely, 100%, and I really, really value is the only time you fail is really just when you decide to stop doing it. 'Cause I
yep,
really do think you just gotta it's just crisis management, right? Like, just go to the next item, fix it, keep going. Don't give up on it, I think is probably something else I would say to somebody who wants to grow.
yep. You gotta stay in the game and stay around the hoop, and eventually it gets better before it gets harder. But the first few years are very tough. So anyone listening that's thinking about doing this is it's not a cakewalk. It's not easy, but it is very fulfilling and rewarding, and the end is very much worth it. Or further into the process is very, very much worth it.
Absolutely.
Well, Nora, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your story and what you've learned and your perspective on things. If anyone listening wants to find you or reach out, are you on Instagram or LinkedIn, or is there a place that we should send them?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely my Instagram, which is at Nora Farhat, just first and last name. You can also look me up by checking out Upside Down Entrepreneurship, and then kind of links me up to all of my things. But Instagram would be kind of the primary place to go to. I try to share and post, and I'm always open to kind of reaching out to people and connecting them if they need that connection through something.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for coming on, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it.